The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
On this episode of Comes with the Territory, a string of fires on St. Thomas has caused some alarm among residents. Virgin Islands Fire and Emergency Medical Services Director Designee Antonio Stevens is here to share more about the ongoing investigations, as well as his plans for the department.
I'm more than satisfied that they did the due diligence.
As Martin Luther King would say, justice delayed is justice denied.
Senators Carla Joseph and Franklin Johnson are speaking out following the Ethics Committee's recent dismissal of the sexual harassment complaint filed by Joseph against Johnson. We'll have reactions from both sides. Plus,
I see people getting killed, women, children.
in recent weekends, St. Thomas has witnessed a string of disturbing homicides and shootings, prompting concerns amongst residents. Two lawmakers have responded with proposed measures to combat this alarming trend. We'll have details. And later, this week's panel joins the conversation to analyze these issues and more. Comes with the Territory starts now. Welcome to Comes with the Territory. I'm Leslie Kamisiang. We begin with the string of fires that occurred on St. Thomas within the past few months, including blazes at 3 locations within a single week in late February, followed by 2 vehicle fires in March. Here's more. According to media reports, a structural fire broke out on January 25th at a residential property in Altona and Wellgunst. A month later, on February 23rd, another fire occurred in Estate Soberg. Dispatch units worked swiftly to contain the blaze, resulting in the loss of a house and a shed, according to Deputy Chief of Operations, Eustace Grant.
We had a fully engulfed structure. We lost the structure already when we became a common scene. We just wanted to protect all the exposures. What we had was a farm with some chickens and other stuff like that. We was able to protect that area, and then the bottom area where we also was able to save the dwelling that's down there. No one was hurt. All the firefighters were safe on the ground. 3
days later, on February 26th, the fire department responded to another fire at the Tropical Bliss Spa in Crown Bay Center. The fire originating from the spa's back room was contained within 10 minutes, preventing further damage. The very next day, on February 27th, the fire service reported that the second story of the abandoned Beachcomber Hotel was fully engulfed in flames. Emergency services responded to the scene as the fire visibly tore through the structure. In addition to the string of fires in February, at least 2 more blazes occurred in March. A vehicle fire at the entrance of Cosules on March 1st, and a safari bus fire on March 13th on Magans Bay Road. No additional information was immediately released regarding the causes of the fires or the status of the investigations. Joining the show to provide an update on the recent fires on St. Thomas, as well as his plans for the Virgin Islands Fire and Emergency Services, is Director Designee Antonio Stevens. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Mr. Stevens, let's begin by discussing the fires on St. Thomas that made the news headlines and provide the community with an update on some of these fires, starting with the one on the 25th of January. It was a residential structural fire. What was the cause of that particular situation?
Well, the cause of that particular fire was, from what we determined from the Arson Investigation Unit, was a power strip. We determined that was an accidental fire, which was unfortunate. Any fire is unfortunate, but finding that it was a power strip is concerning because this is something that we have in all our homes, all our businesses.
True,
we have power
very
strips,
true.
And so we just need to make sure that we don't overuse it, put too many connections in it, and daisy chain, so to speak.
And the fire that followed on the 23rd in Estate Soberg, we lost that. An entire home was lost there. Do we know what the cause of that was?
We do not. The other 3 fires are still under investigation.
Okay.
And so we don't want to disclose any details about those fires as yet because we don't want to alarm anyone.
Yes.
So we just want to do our due diligence and continue the investigation into those other 3 fires.
So, and I'm glad you said that you don't want to cause any alarm, because that's one of the things we try to do here, not to, put out any information that's inaccurate or that may cause false alarms. But so we mentioned the Soberg fire, the fire at Tropical Bliss in Crown Bay, also still under investigation. And then the Beachcomber fire as well.
Still under investigation. What I don't want people to take away is that they're somehow connected.
Got it. Good point.
Each one had its individual characteristics. That's what we found out from the preliminary investigations, but we don't want to. So we know for a fact right now that they're not connected. But we do want to continue our investigation process.
Typically, how long does it take for an investigation to be completed?
An investigation can be completed in as little as 3 to 5 days, or it can take 5 to 10 years. Depending on what the situation is.
Really?
The department is tasked with determining origin and cause. The origin of the fire and the cause of the fire. And then we get deeper into, okay, once you find cause, can we say this is how it happened and put pieces together to come to a conclusive.
Does that ever include sending like evidence off island or going to labs? Let's talk about that a little bit.
It does. We have the Alcohol and Tobacco Agency who supports us. A lot of times they come down and assist us in major fires, and they are assisting in one of these fires that we just mentioned. I don't want to get too deep into.
You don't want to give away too much.
So they are assisting us, and so there are times when they do, along with VIPD, do help us in with the assistance of trying to determine whether it's a forensic situation or where ATF comes in and tries to assist us in determining what actually happened.
And say, for instance, and I just want to help the community understand, if indeed there are some nefarious reasons behind a fire, what steps are then taken by the fire department?
Well, then VIPD is involved because then they have a bigger law enforcement arm than we do. Let's say, for instance, if there's a death, it automatically goes over to VIPD. But there's some steps that we have to take to make sure that we do our part and then get VIPD involved to take over. But we have to present them with enough for them to take over.
Let's turn to your leadership of the Virgin Islands Emergency Services. You are now the director designee?
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to make sure I get that right. What are your top priorities, and what vision do you have for the entity? It's gone through a lot of transformation and changes recently. So let's hear what you envision for your leadership tenure there.
My tenure is, number one, to continue the legacy that former director Darrell George started. We started with the integration, and I want to continue the build out of that integration. Everybody thinks that, the integration happened and it's done. It's not. There's a lot of work that needs to get done right now. My biggest priority today is to hire paramedics. We are hurting for paramedics within the territory. I have 1 paramedic in St. Croix district, and I have 6 here in the St. Thomas St. John district, which is barely enough to support the community to which we so love.
So let's get a quick clarification here. Paramedics that work with fire or paramedics at the hospitals?
No, all paramedics in fire and EMS.
Now that the integration is taking place, good. Because a lot of people aren't up to speed with that, as you mentioned.
So if you're EMT paramedic, advanced EMT, and you want to work, you will be working under the branch of the Virgin Islan Emergency Medical Service rather than the Department of Health where they were before.
So we see these ambulances with a brand that I think it's Pafford. They also work under your auspices.
They do. Pafford is here on a contract to help support us, and it's a contract that we are trying to work ourselves off of. But in the meantime, what we're trying to do is reach out, whether it's in the community or on the mainland, to try to get paramedics into the territory to support and get us off of that dependency on PAFID.
So what right now is the status of EMS certification and training with the department?
To clarify the question.
So how long does it take, for instance, for a paramedic to get trained, or if there's fire service personnel right now that want to undergo that training, what's the process?
So to become an EMT, it's like a 3-month course. To become a paramedic is almost 9 months to 12 months.
Ah, okay.
Because it's a more involved situation. It's almost like a step below a doctor, so to speak. But in the field, because they do have to administer drugs in the field, they do have to stabilize a patient in the field, which is called pre-hospital care. So that schooling is a lot more involved, requires a lot more work. So we want to make that, for us, is like the long haul. We're doing very well with hiring EMTs and training our in-house firefighters to become EMTs. Right now, I can say proudly that we basically have more dual role, which is a firefighter EMTs, than we do have the single role providers, which is just the EMTs. But our gap, our need is to hire more paramedics within the territory.
Great. In the past, there have been challenges. We hear from neighborhoods, whether it's on the east end of St. Croix or Coral Bay and St. John or Bordeaux and Fortuna here, where it takes too long for emergency services to reach them. How is the department addressing those geological challenges throughout the territory?
So you mentioned St. John. What I don't know if the public is aware, but we do have 2 ambulance locations in St. John. One in town and the other one out in Cruz Bay. So that was a need that community kept on bringing up, and so we found a way to address it. So we have 2 ambulances on St. John, 2 areas that they respond from. As far
Let me interrupt you real quickly. Sorry about this, but once if they have to be ambulance boat down to St. Thomas, I know there have been challenges there. What's the status of the ambulance boat, and is it up and running and available for St. Joanians?
The ambulance boat is up and running. There are times when we have to dry dock it for maintenance reasons. So, but whenever that happens, it's scheduled, and so we do have a backup that we have a program with that takes care of that. I'll take the opportunity right now to mention that we do have another boat, which is a fire boat that should be here by the end of the year, and we do plan to use that basically in the same manner, even though its capabilities are a bit different, which is to assist in firefighting. But we can transport patients if need be.
Oh, that's good. That's good news. And what about the residents in, say, the east end of St. Croix and the west end of St. Thomas?
So the residents in east end of St. Croix, they are comfortable, I would say. We do have a station out there. We do not have like a EMT or EMR out in that location, but we're still within that 8 to 10 minute window from the Richmond station to get to the eastern side.
Okay.
So we're good there. I know here in the St. Thomas area, where we do have a bit of challenge, the intent is to get a response to you from any place on the island within 8 minutes. Right now, we're outside that window from some locations, but we're continuously working on it. We are currently in that phase where we're trying to build out where the damage to that Tuna Station. We're getting a brand new station, and when that brand new station is built, we will have a response unit in that area. It might not be an ambulance, but it will be.
That's what I was going to ask.
It will be at least an EMT or an emergency medical responder to at least get there, stabilize the patient prior to transport.
So the key isn't necessarily the type of vehicle, but having the personnel that could address the challenges if there's a medical emergency, especially that the individual is having.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Let's talk about the status of renovations of the one of your stations on St. Croix. I understand that some extensive renovations has been taking place. Let's talk about that for our Cruisian viewers.
So everyone by now knows that this process is a long process. I remember in 2019, we said, okay, well, we got these awards. We're going to start building stations and making modifications. I'm pleased to say within the next couple of days, we will be starting the rebuild of a brand new station in the Grove Place area, the Charles Tapicil station, which is great news for that community. And something that I'm looking forward to. And there are a couple of other stations, the Eastern Station, which you just mentioned, and St. Croix, that's scheduled for a complete new station as well. The Fortuna here in St. Thomas is going to be a new station as well.
Good news.
I don't know if everyone remembered, but back in December, when we had the funeral, we did say that we were going to name that station after Darrell George. So we're looking forward to those projects coming online.
And timelines that you can share. You have any timelines in mind for when those could happen? Because we're at the point now from our recovery where, like you said, we hear about these awards, we hear about obligations, and then it's like, okay, where's the new buildings?
And then all the paperwork that goes on behind the scenes that no one knows about.
Let's talk about anything else that the community needs to know. We had these rasher fires. You gave some good advice about the power strips that we all have in our homes, but just simple safety tips that the community could use to help to keep their homes and businesses safer.
I'm gonna do a little PSA, which
Sure.
In St. Croix we just had a long Easter holiday weekend, and I want to take my hats off to that community because they did an outstanding job. We didn't get not one call, but all the campers that were out there, everyone conducted themselves in a safe manner. No fires, no issues that we could talk about, right? So, which is good. And we just want to continue that trend. We know that Carnival is coming up, and we want to continue that trend here in the St. Thomas, St. John district to be safe. Not just when it comes to fire, but everything, accidents on the road and all these other kind of things. We just want you to be safe out there.
Great. And Mr. Stevens, one last thing. When do you expect your confirmation to be finished and you get sworn in as director?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't have a date on that as yet, but what I can say so far, I'm excited. I think the men and women in the Virgin Islands Fire Service are excited. So I just want to pick up this mantle and continue to push on making the service a better place for the men and women that serve.
I appreciate that. Up next, we'll hear from this week's panel, but first, let's take a look at the topics up for discussion. The Senate Committee on Ethical Conduct recently dismissed Senator Clifford Joseph's complaint against Senator Franklin Johnson, which alleged sexual harassment and assault stemming from a handshake between both senators on the Senate floor last November. Joseph, who shared documents related to the complaint with WTJX Channel 12, said she was disappointed with the length of time it took for the matter to reach the Ethics Committee. She also questioned the investigation process.
It's very egregious that I never was interviewed. I never had any discussion with anyone from the Committee on Ethical Conduct. And I'm very disappointed. I'm very disappointed with how this was conducted. This is a miscarriage of justice.
Johnson said the Committee on Ethical Conduct didn't interview him either.
I wrote a report, I submitted to them. And from the report I wrote, and from the investigation that they did, when they look at the cameras, nothing to the nature that what she said. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
The incident that triggered Joseph's complaint allegedly happened on November 14, 2023, on the Senate floor at the Earl B. Otley Legislative Hall, just prior to the legislative session. Joseph claims she was about to exit the chamber when Senator Johnson approached her and she extended her hand for a friendly handshake. She claims that during the handshake, Johnson squeezed her hand so hard she was unable to pull it loose, even though she told him that she had to go to the restroom. Joseph claims that Johnson continued gripping her hand as he told her that she could do what she needed to go to the bathroom to do on the Senate floor.
What is that? What mentality does a human being have to do that to a female?
Johnson denies ever making the restroom comment to Joseph.
She alleged all types of things that she said she wanted to go to the bathroom, and I tell her whatever she wanted to do, she could do here. None of that never happened. It was nothing more than a handshake.
The Committee on Ethical Conduct indicated in its advisory opinion that it was not timely convened in accordance with the rules of the legislature, but the complaint appeared alarming and should be decided on the merits. Senate President Novelle Francis noted several issues that allowed for the delay, including a lapse in time from when Joseph filed her initial complaint to when she filed an amended complaint, as well as the time it took for Johnson to respond. But the rules were not broken, Francis said. In explaining how members were selected for the Ethics Committee, Francis said he first asked Senators Maurice James and Marvin Blyden to conduct an initial investigation to determine the next steps to resolve the complaint, but both senators declined. Francis said he subsequently chose the 5 members for the Committee on Ethical Conduct: Senator Diane Capehart as chair, and Senators Samuel Catillon, Dwayne DeGraff, Kenneth Gittens, and Milton Potter. Most of them had prior experience serving on the Ethics Committee during the sexual harassment investigation involving ousted at-large Senator Stephen Payne, according to Francis.
I'm thankful that the Ethics Committee, along with legal counsel, did their due diligence and could find nothing close to being the truth. Have Senator Joseph had the guts to come and say, I'm sorry? No, because she believed in her head that what she says go, and it's right, and it happened. I stand clearly that it never happened. I'm pleased with the results and what the conclusion was from the Ethics Committee, and I'm ready to move forward to do the work of the people.
Joseph had a different take.
As Martin Luther King would say, justice delayed is justice denied. And so my justice and justice for all persons who have been in similar situations is being denied, because we are not given an opportunity to be interviewed and to face our accusers. And this is justice denied right here.
Recent weekends in St. Thomas were marked by a troubling wave of gun violence, with multiple shootings and homicides dominating news headlines. It's become so concerning that Senator Kenneth Gittens, who chairs the legislature's Homeland Security, Justice, and Public Safety Committee, is calling on the executive branch for assistance. In a recent press release, Gittens, who is a former police officer, urged the governor to gather all available enforcement personnel from various government agencies and assign them to work with the Virgin Islands Police Department for the next 90 days.
The Department of Licensing and Consumer, the Department of Planning and Natural Resources, you have Department of Health, you have the VA lottery, you even have fire marshals who are sworn law enforcement personnel. And I'm saying with all these individuals pooled under the Virgin Islands Police Department, there will be actual boots on the ground addressing the crime situation that we're experiencing right now. There's a number of police vehicles as well that's in the territory, that's been in the territory for some time now, weeks to months, that's parked up. So there's enough vehicles for these officers to be able to drive in, and these officers will be able to mobilize while being paired up with a Virgin Islands police officer.
Gittens is also pushing for the police department to conduct more traffic stops, believing it would deter the circulation of unlicensed firearms.
You could find these things in vehicles, and a lot of these vehicles that are moving or traversing throughout the territory that's unregistered, uninsured or something, we could intervene and stop some sort of violence ahead of time. And so I just want to see these initiatives taking place so that we can address this immediately.
Senator Dwayne DeGraff, also a former police officer, issued a public statement in response to the surge in gun violence.
To see the Holy Week come and a couple people get shot, and then the following weekend, another set of people getting shot, too much people losing their lives. We got to come together and do something about this.
DeGraff said he sponsored legislation to ban assault weapons in the territory and to ban ghost guns from being shipped into the territory through the mail system.
Act 8547, it removed ghost guns or zip guns. Those are guns that come to the territory, they don't have any serial numbers, and they're sold legally, and individuals can buy them in parts and send them home, and they come in through the mail. So recently I've added an amendment to that bill to put that individuals have to get permission from the police commissioner. Because presently what happens is they come into the post office, and if there's no law in place, then the post office itself has to give them that particular component. And we're banning all assault rifles. We're seeing too many people get killed, and people who have nothing to do with the issue getting killed from how powerful those weapons are.
DeGraff stressed that curbing gun violence ultimately begins with community involvement.
We're asking the community to step up. If we got to get together as a vigil, we got to get together with laws. I'm doing my part and trying my best to be a part of it, to assist VIPD in getting these persons put behind bars and address this evil situation that's taking place at this time.
Joining me on set to delve into these topics are criminal defense attorney Melanie Turnbull and community advocate Ian Samuel. Thank you both for being here. And joining the panel discussion from our St. Croix studio, let's welcome to the show former Fire Services Director Clifford Joseph. It's great to have you here, Mr. Joseph. Let's start with you, Mr. Joseph. As a former Fire Service Director, what was your take on the interview we had with the new designee, Mr. Stevens?
Yes, Mr. Stevens has taken over the service in a different era. So I would say good luck to him and his crew going forward, because I'm here to stay in the Virgin Islands, so I sure want to see them be prosperous in the new venture as far as the EMS merger going forward to serve this community.
Mr. Samuels, as being a resident of St. John, you heard what Mr. Stevens said in regards to the station over there, their ability to respond, the response times that they have, and being short of the goal sometimes and not having enough personnel. What are the residents on St. John feeling as far as emergency services right now?
I think over the period of the merger, I think we can see the betterment of the systems in terms of responding. Like Director Stevens mentioned, they do have 2 ambulances, one stationed in Cruz Bay and one stationed in Coral Bay. So calls on the eastern end, which is Coral Bay, are responded to by fire EMS in Coral Bay, which is a big difference. In the past, EMS had to be dispatched from Cruz Bay to respond to Coral Bay. So the response times have gotten tremendously better.
That's good to hear. Attorney Turnbull, you heard him also talk about the difficulties in getting paramedics trained, and the distinction between the EMTs and the I didn't even know that.
I didn't either.
I thought that was very interesting. But we hear about shortages like that, and in emergency services, it's so difficult because it's such an essential service. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think there's a labor shortage in general in every industry, and I think one of the problems that we're suffering from is just economic resources. And so when you have a position that's very difficult to fill, you find that you have to spend more money to incentivize people to come down. But I think we shall also encourage people in the community to go and get the training. From what he said, it's only anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. And that does not seem like a significant period of time to just have someone go away and get training. Because we can make it conditional. So we can have someone... we can pay for people to go and get training, put them under contract. If they leave early, then they have to pay back the school fees or pay back portions of the contract and have some kind of clawback clause in a contract. And so I think that we need to get innovative in how we fill these positions because there's just a labor shortage everywhere.
Mr. Joseph, let me come back to you. You mentioned that he's taken over in a different time. Talk about some of the positive changes you've seen happen in emergency services and the fire department since your leadership.
Again, the only thing that really changed is the actual merger, because we had maybe 6 or 8 that were trained prior to me leaving as EMTs. The focus then, and I'm happy to hear that they're getting there, is the infrastructures, because the infrastructures are hurricane driven and they're still waiting to be repaired. And you got to remember that the personnel works 24 hours. So when you leave in your home to go to this next home, you would want to make sure that the next home is as secure as the one you're leaving.
Ah,
Because you're going out there to give a service. I still take my hat all the way off to the folks who still goes to work every day, because the working conditions have been tight. So give kudos to everybody who worked for the department.
wow. Well, that's an interesting insight that you provide, being a former firefighter. I'm going to come to you, Attorney Turnbull. We just heard the piece on the Ethics Committee at the legislature dismissing the complaint that's filed by Senator Joseph against Senator Johnson. We got two J's there. From a legal perspective, does Senator Carla Joseph have any legal recourse that she can take? Can she take this to perhaps a court outside of the legislature to handle her complaint?
She could. So whether she can take it, yes. Whatever happens to an individual, they can take it, file a police report, and then take that police report to the Department of Justice. That's something that she can use, an opportunity that she can take. But the question really becomes whether she really has a claim that can get far. And I don't know from on its face how far that claim would go. I don't know if the Attorney General's office would actually take a report just from the limited complaint that I read, would take that report and actually file charges. The standard is a little bit higher. And in these cases where you have a lot of he say, she say, it's very difficult because it's a lot easier for the ethics committee. It's preponderance of the evidence, but it's beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal system and in a criminal setting. And so whether the handshake accompanied with the bathroom comments can, pass muster beyond a reasonable doubt, I don't think so.
Very interesting point.
I personally don't think so. But I do think that the ethics committee, and this is not to really cast any aspersions on any of the senators. I respect our senators. I really do think that they bungled this entire process and this entire investigation. Because when you really review some of the things that they said, they tried to say that her complaint was out of time. And I just disagree with that, just fundamentally. It can't be out of time when you don't have an ethics committee in place. And so they made a big fuss about the ethics committee being 100 days
the timing of it
past the incident or past her complaint. Well, she made a complaint in a reasonable time, which is 2 days, and the ethics committee was not formed or convened. And so to then ding her and say that she didn't follow the rules and we're going to be dismissing on this procedural issue, I don't find that meritorious. I don't like that they ruled that way, but I do like that they still looked at it on the merits, but I don't think that they did an actual investigation. It just seemed very conclusory, but I do think her sexual assault, sexual harassment accusation was also conclusory. I think the assault and battery, she gave facts to support it, but in her follow-up, she just said sexual harassment with nothing else. And that's too conclusory to kind of make any kind of assessment of.
Great legal analysis. Mr. Samuel, let me ask you, I'm curious to know what's going through your head when you saw the piece, and overall, how you think Virgin Islanders feel when we have to know this is happening about our leadership in the territory?
I mean, it's obviously concerning, and it's he said, she said, right? So it's hard to kind of take sides.
Yeah.
Perception is reality. So, like, if somebody's perceived as, or that's how they feel it, to not have it addressed or looked at or investigated is concerning. So, and to be accused or of as well, and it not necessarily be what the intention was, could be a little bit
unnerving as well.
Unnerving as well. So.
Absolutely. Let me come to you, Mr. Joseph. Hearing the piece, what do you think the legislature may have done differently, or what could they put in place to avoid incidents like this happening in the future?
Since they're going through where she alleged sexual harassment, maybe they need to check on who all in the legislature has been trained from top to bottom as far as sexual harassment. Because that's very, like I told you earlier with training is
Yes.
very essential in every magnitude that we work. So when we don't, we take things for granted, or our culture and our behavior from in the past kind of keep riding on. But if we all now modernize and we understand behaviors, so we need to train to make sure where are the lines. Because there was no lines to begin with. So that's my point. I feel like everybody in the legislature needs to be trained on the behaviors itself. Because you could write all the laws that you want, but if you don't take time for every employee, not just the senators, to have a chance to understand how the thin line with sexual harassment, because it's very important. If you, like the other speaker was saying, if you felt uncomfortable and you address a situation, you expect for something to come back to you in writing. I think that a lot of that verbal stuff doesn't work.
Very interesting.
I feel that's my position.
Very, very interesting perspective. I'm going to come back to you with a question, Attorney Turnbull. But Mr. Samuel, what do you think about the composition of the committee, the ethics committee that was convened? There was only one woman on the committee.
I think, the resistance by the first senators that were asked to do the committee, I thought they were more qualified to take the investigation or be a part of the committee based on their background. I mean, all of those things come into effect when especially, unlike a trial, you don't have a jury, but ultimately they're the ones making the decision on whether to, move this further or, what the next steps are.
Yeah. Well, we know, Attorney Turnbull, that the Senate President selected the members for this ethics committee. But do you think it's unusual that both parties weren't interviewed in this situation?
Not necessarily. I don't think it's unusual. Sometimes you can see a complaint on its face. You can do your own background investigation without interviewing the parties, particularly in this type of setting. I think the best practice should be to interview the individuals and even to interview the witnesses that the individuals claimed were present. And so to see that none of that really happened, it was really confusing to me. I don't believe that a thorough investigation had taken place to investigate her claims, because the claims are very serious claims that she made. I don't think she has a sexual harassment claim. I don't think that they should have investigated that. You can't just say sexual harassment and then someone investigates. I think that's improper. But the assault and battery claim, I do believe that they should have investigated, because holding someone's hand firmly and not letting them go, whether the committee found it to be assault or not, it, to me, meets muster of being assault and battery. It's an unwanted touch.
Mr. Joseph, I'm going to come back to you real quickly. Do you find it odd, like I do, that there are parts of the legislature that there are no cameras that recorded this? I'm curious to hear what you think about that.
That shouldn't be, that's not conducive in the era that we're in.
Exactly.
That's not conducive.
Anybody else on the panel? I mean, now it's like we got security loopholes in the very legislature that a taxpayer spent a lot of money on security and a sergeant of arms and everything. Why don't we have cameras that record all the public spaces in the Virgin Islands legislature?
I do think that's interesting. They were talking about it's a pause and play. And so I think cameras could have resolved some of this, because the he say, she say in itself is a difference of facts. And so those differences has to be explored.
Sure.
Why would Senator Joseph call out Sergeant at Arms for a lobbying conversation? Or why would Senator Joseph not mention the lobbying? These are inherent issues from the factual disputes that need to be explored. And so no aspersions against the Senate,
Of course.
the senators, the ethical committee, but I do believe that they bungled this investigation. I'm not sure if the outcome would be different, but the investigation, the process, and even the procedural process of convening the committee was also bungled. I know they are claiming that it wasn't, but I think on its face, just reading the rules, it clearly was.
Wow. Two senators recently have come out talking about the spate of gun violence. And it's kind of interesting because, yes, they are both police officers, but gun violence is not new to this territory. So I'm wondering why now. The one thing that I found very interesting that we know has become an issue across the country is the issue of ghost guns. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Joseph, on the island of St. Croix. The one solution that has been offered by Senator Gittens about mobilizing all the available enforcement personnel from various agencies to support VIPD for the next 90 days. What do you think about that, and how effective do you think that could be?
I don't support all because I think that's where our problems start in our little Virgin Islands. When we have, if you move all at this time, like for instance, I feel if a department having 3 or 4, if it's 4, you could go with 2 and rotate them because you can't just suffocate one issue and allow another one to start to grow. Meaning, if you take everybody from DPNR and you put them to work the police force for 90 days, then maybe the guys who fishing or doing something else illegal will have a field day because now you went with all of the employees. So I feel the measure is not a bad idea, but I just feel not all. If you're using some and then you rotate back to the next 2 and you let 2 go over, because the training again will be good because it needs to be addressed. I feel the gun violence maybe might have started from maybe less educated folks when it first started, but today, I wouldn't say that today. I feel today most of it is just retaliatory. Most revenge, you kill my brother and I can wait a while until I got a chance at you. And then we live in a small place and trust me, actions will be taken based on somebody else comment or, yeah, but I wasn't taking that for this amount of time. I know I had to gain back and we just continue and we continue. I do support, well, we're speaking about Gittins situation, and I'm just saying that I support the measure to a point, but not to take all at once, because I feel you allow for next set of elements to start to grow on us.
And that's a very good point. I'm going to come to you, Mr. Samuel, because I know you've been intimately involved in making sure that VIPD officers are receiving training, and some of these other agencies that Senator Gittens is also referring to. We know they go through the police academy to get their law enforcement training. But do you think a proposal like that could work, and what kind of impact would it have?
I personally don't think it would work. I mean, if you look at the functions of some of the other officers from the different agencies, they don't have the same protocols. They don't have the same type of policing that a police officer does, a VIPD officer does. And so in my mind, you're putting them in danger, right? They don't know how to de-escalate a situation. Maybe they didn't have to have that training because they don't deal. A lottery police doesn't deal with.
So going through the academy isn't enough then?
No, definitely not. I mean, there's so much more training after you do that. And, our attorney is shaking her head because she, the lack of training is to her benefit as a defense attorney. She's laughing, so I'm sorry. But no, I think it would, even for simple reporting. So you have a lottery officer, for example, and not to pick on lottery, I'm just have to respond to a crime scene, and they don't know the protocol of handling that crime scene. That messes up the chances of prosecution.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And what's concerning for me as a resident is that a former police officer, as a senator, would recommend that.
Interesting. Your take on the same thing. And logistically, is there something that could be done, for instance, to Mr. Samuel's point, bringing in people that aren't necessarily trained to handle a crime scene? Would you put them, for instance, on traffic or simpler enforcement type crimes that don't require the extensive training or the utilization of the training that they do have would be optimal. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I have to agree with my brother, Mr. Samuel, over here, because
Y'all just met y'all brother and
I
sister
know
already. Okay,
we are.
I like that.
Because you're talking about pulling resources from a territory that has very, very strained resources. And just for a 90-day period, I'm not understanding the purpose. I don't see the objective. I don't see what how it can benefit the community. I also totally agree with the lack of training, the lack of experience in these skill sets. So just trying to put extra bodies on the ground for a 90-day period to show some sort of police presence, I don't think that gets to the heart of the issue of gun violence, which I have a lot of thoughts on. But no, I don't agree with this measure at all.
Mr. Joseph, one of the other suggestions that was made by Senator Gittens is to conduct more traffic stops to deter the circulation of unlicensed firearms. I'm curious to hear what's going through your head when you hear that. Works, doesn't work, good idea, not a good idea.
That should be continuous. I don't see why they do it for a period of time and then stop. I think it needs to be continuous. I think he also mentioned about the amount of unlicensed vehicles we have on the road. So if you were doing traffic stop, I think that would be slowing down some of that issue. So it'll work if it's continuous. Even if it's continuous, meaning it don't have to be weekly, but it just doesn't stop within the month.
Understood.
So when the next month come around, it's not a 90-day process either. I mean, you just have to continue doing what we're doing. If there's a reason to stop, you stop them.
I want to get a quick question in. The banning of assault rifles was mentioned by Senator DeGraff, Attorney Turnbull, and the shipping of ghost gun components through the mail is also an issue. As a criminal attorney, are you seeing cases where ghost guns are now becoming prevalent, and these assault rifles that Senator DeGraff is referring to?
I wouldn't say ghost guns are becoming prevalent, but I do think I have seen a rise in assault rifles. And the senator is right. There is no on the book assault rifle law, but they don't necessarily have to have one, because it would more likely than not come under unauthorized possession of a firearm. There's not many people that are going to be committing crimes with a registered assault rifle. That's just not. I just think what we end up doing is we end up over policing. We end up drafting a lot of legislation, and all of these things are band-aids for a much, much bigger issue.
Yeah.
A deep-rooted issue. And I think we're also starting too late. We are seeing homicides and gun violence, and we're trying to spur to act, but we're acting and treating the wrong thing. We need to be starting in 3rd grade if we want gun violence to go down.
Yeah,
because not, we just had a rash of gun violence.
Yeah.
And so now let's send police everywhere and let's make new laws. That's not going to change it.
You want to add something really quickly,
I think what you said is absolutely right on point. I've been saying from 2016, before the storms, that, your thoughts lead to your words lead to your actions, right? And your actions lead to your lifestyle. So let's look at the past 7 years, right? Or 8 years. We had the storms, we had COVID. How much education, like Mr. Joseph mentioned, are these folks getting, right? So like, how do you resolve? How do you de-escalate? You don't know how to handle certain things. Your social anxiety is at utmost high because you've been cooped up.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of things. And 3rd grade, what people don't realize is that in large communities, jails
are built
based on
standardized
the 3rd grade.
test scores.
Yes, 3rd grade.
3rd grade standardized test scores. That's how they decide how many jail cells to build. During a recent Senate Committee on Health, Hospital, and Human Services meeting, the topic of standard wait times at the Juan Luis Hospital's emergency room sparked questions and concerns. Here's more.
Our operations are faced with a few challenges, including the emergency room department wait times and the housing of boarders. It is important to note that increased wait times are reflective of life-threatening complaints, as all patients undergo triage upon arrival. Those with life-threatening emergencies are immediately treated in exam rooms.
What is the current wait time?
The average is about 2 hours.
2 hours what?
Waiting time in the emergency room.
First of all, I must say that average waiting time, 2 hours, wow. I would like to know who goes to the hospital and comes out in 2 hours being served, because I mean, everybody that I know and my own personal experience has not been 2 hours.
Interesting to hear Senator Carrion respond like that, because wait times in hospitals all over the country are long, like 2 hours. And I've been to the hospital. I'll be able to say I've been to the hospital with people that have been treated under 2 hours. So I could attest to that, but that's not everybody's experience. And I don't want to cast the aspersion that that's what happens. But you hear about long wait times all over the country. And I empathize, because they're in a situation where they have to pick, who needs services immediately. But let me come to you, Mr. Joseph. And since you worked in emergency services personnel in the territory, when, as a professional, and I'm sure you've been around a lot of emergency rooms as a firefighter, when you're under that stress of having to decide who gets treated and when they get treated, what is the thought process that goes into that?
He was clear. I mean, it's a triage setting. I mean, the person that needs the attention would get it first. You come in and you just have, regardless of where you came in from, like if you got breathing issues, they try and take care of you first. If you're losing blood, they take care of you first. So that's the way it works. 2 hours. Because remember, when you're talking about average, so like you said, some folks might be in and it comes to your timing, you come there and the place empty.
Yep.
Sometimes you come there and the place, a whole lot of folks who suffering from a flu, and the whole emergency room is filled. So again, if you have a situation that calls for you to be ahead of these folks, you'll be gone or treated anyway before somebody that been there for 3 or 4 hours. So it's you look at the draw with an emergency room. So that's why a lot of people continue to feel, emergency room, let me see what I could do first before I go.
And that's a good point he makes, because we know that emergency rooms become sometimes primary care, the primary care location for many uninsured Virgin Islanders. So the preventative care that should take place to avoid people having to go to the emergency room, it becomes the place of first resort. Mr. Samuel, what do you, I'm curious to know what's going through your mind as you listen to this conversation.
I mean, we don't have a hospital on St. John. We have a clinic. So, our response time includes if you have to get shipped on a boat over to the emergency room. And what's unfortunate, and I don't know if it's changed, is that once we get there, it's almost like we have to check back in, like it's a whole new registration process. Even though Myra Keaton and RLS are the same entity, it's almost like we're just getting in there. So
that's an interesting perspective, and something that those of us on the other islands would probably never think about.
I mean, I could tell you horror stories, and we're not gonna. That's not what the basis of it is. You're talking about. I think all the hospitals could do better, but it's the equipment. I mean, we're 7 years out of hurricanes. All of our hospital systems were destroyed. Is the equipment effective? And so let's find some partnerships maybe with some larger hospital systems that can offer telemedicine support or something that allows us to leverage our time and resources.
A little better. Attorney Turnbull, I know you're a very creative individual. What could we do to reduce some of these wait times, or make the time that people are waiting perhaps a bit more comfortable or palatable or easy to deal with?
I think first they can remodel the wait time, the waiting lounge. I was there a month ago, and the wait time was 8 hours with a toddler, and so 2 hours sounds crazy to me.
Yeah, and I've had those 8-hour wait times as well. So let me say 1 and 2,
Yes,
as
yes.
we like to say locally.
The care has always been great. The care at the end of the day has always been great. But I do agree. Perhaps we could do some telemedicine. We could also do. We can also have check-ins where you're next in line. What they're doing out at the B&B, where they take your number and they text you to message you to come back. And so you may not necessarily have to be
Sit there, yeah.
sitting in the ER the
So the
entire
utilization
time.
of technology.
Yes, I think could help.
And you know, you brought up telemedicine. Perhaps while you're sitting there, a doctor somewhere could telemedicine you on your phone or something and say, hey, what are the symptoms you're exhibiting, or do some kind of triage in advance of you going in to see the actual emergency room doctor.
And even if, you got to be creative as well. I think, even if you have an information person in the emergency room, right? So many times you sit there and you're just wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
So if there was somebody that's saying, hey guys, we had a, code blue or something come up, all our resources are taking care of that. As soon as we have a better understanding of the time that we can see you, we'll let you know.
I like that idea, sending people a text.
Send me home.
Yes, go back home,
Send me
if
home.
it's nothing serious, and we'll give you a call within a half hour or whatever hour when we'll be able to actually see you and back. I think those are great recommendations, and hopefully, somebody is listening or watching the show that can help to implement those. Mr. Joseph on St. Croix, I'd like to thank you. Mr. Samuel, Attorney Turnbull, great show. You guys did a great job today, and that is all the show we have for you today. But be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for an all-new episode of Comes with the Territory. In the meantime, for your news updates, tune into WTJX's news feed on weekdays at 5 p.m. or on 93.1 FM or by downloading the WTJX app. I'm Leslie Camisian. For all of us here at WTJX Channel 12, take care.